Jim Harbaugh is playing the game completely different. Jim Harbaugh's comments are completely different. He was asked about NIL and about, of course, the rumors. You hear things like Texas A&M, $30 million to sign a recruiting class. Unverified, but it's been floated out there. And would it shock anybody? No, not really, especially with some of the contracts that we've seen thrown out to these high school athletes. And Jim said, I hear a lot about it. You hear a lot about it. You talk about it. He said, I just don't know how much is real, how much of that's accurate. Is it accurate? Is it like fishtail stories? You just don't know how much of it is actually real. Mm-hmm. Jim says, I've always been for student athletes being able to profit off their name, image, and likeness, which we know that based on his track record. He's always been a player's advocate, whether it was getting rid of the transfer rule so that they could have immediate eligibility. He says, it makes sense, right? We can say the sale of a jersey. Who should have some share of the profit? Should the actual person whose jersey it is or the institution? And Jim says, I think we can all agree that's something that's fair and right. But he says, right or wrong, our philosophy on coming to the University of Michigan is still going to be a transformational experience rather than a transactional experience. And that is both a mission statement and a shot across the bow to every other program in college football. He is simply saying, listen, the guys that we're going to recruit, we are not going to play this game. We are not going to say, listen, if you come here, we can get you $1 million in NIL money while you're here. We're not going to do that. If you come to Michigan, it's because we're going to change who you are as a person. We're going to educate you in the classroom. We're going to educate you and coach you up on the field. We are going to make you better men. We are going to make you Class A representatives of the University of Michigan, and we are going to make you a better football player. We are going to help you achieve pro aspirations because we have some of the best coaches in the world. That is what coming to the University of Michigan is going to be first, foremost, and in finale. That's what it's going to be. You are not going to come here because we can pay you as much or more as another program. We are not going to play that game. And that will hurt Michigan on the recruiting trail. The same way academic standards and not recruiting guys who barely graduated high school has hurt them on the trail. The same way not being able to take transfers the way other schools do has hurt them on the trail. The same way not even looking at JUCOs has hurt them as a program. But Michigan is going to do things their way. And this is something that fans struggle with. Because at the end of the day, most Michigan fans, especially those that are not alumni, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone has the great honor of going to the University of Michigan. There's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of alumni do hold their school in a little more esteem. They want their degree to have that value. So they're a little more stingy with it. But even a lot of alumni really care about the product on the field more than how we achieve those results. Especially fans would love Michigan to throw its weight around. This is one of the most storied programs in the history of college football. This is not a school hurting for money. This is not an alumni base hurting for money. How many billionaires went to the University of Michigan? So many. That's not the issue here. But we have chosen to play a different game. And a lot of fans don't like what they will call self-inflicted wounds. I would call it righteousness.
Well, and it's the Well, yeah, I mean, listen, it's hard not to romanticize what Harbaugh said, okay? Right? The transformational versus the transactional. It's hard not to be like, rah, rah, and like fall in love with Jim Harbaugh because of what he said. But taking it from the fans' perspective, it's really hard to reconcile the success versus reality, right? It's really hard to reconcile the righteousness with the reality because you can't have your cake and eat it too in a situation like this. You're either going to have a national championship caliber team or you're going to have a team that plays by the rules. That's the way that it is. So if you want the national championship team, then don't talk about other teams cheating. If you want to have the program that holds the higher moral ground, let's say, for lack of a better term, then you can't complain about 9-3. and not beating Ohio State and not winning Big Ten championships. And that's, I mean, from our own personal experience, that's kind of a reckoning that I've even had to come to in my own life because, at the end of the day, competitions are meant to be won, right? There are no moral victories when it comes to sports and competition. But when you get into that transformational versus transactional, I mean, obviously that speaks my language more than probably anything else that could be said probably in the sports landscape. I appreciate that, but I'm not going to sit here and just continue to pump up the romanticized aspect of that because it sounds good, and I hope that it does work out. But you also put a pretty large target on your back when you start talking that way and you take the moral high ground. Because when you take the moral high ground, you get yourself under a microscope and everybody starts looking at every single thing that happens within your program and the people that you bring to your program. And if they don't meet that caliber, then it's almost a worse fall than getting caught for cheating. Does that make sense? Because our society just tends to be so backwards when it comes to those types of things.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a